Hi, I'm Eliza. At my wedding, my sister announced her pregnancy with my fiancé. She smiled like she'd won a prize, then whispered, "It's his." I didn't cry or scream. I smiled back, reached for my phone, and played the video that exposed everything they thought I'd never discover. That moment didn't just break my heart, it showed me who they really were, because this wasn't the first betrayal, just the final one. And that day, I didn't run away in tears. I stood tall. Ever wonder what happens when the person they underestimated decides to speak the truth? Before we begin, what time are you listening, and where from? Drop a comment. I want to know who's out there, who's ever had their trust shattered by the people closest to them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I arrived at my wedding alone. Not literally. Of course, there were bridesmaids, planners, makeup artists buzzing around me like hummingbirds. But in all the ways that mattered, I stood by myself. The Rosewood Ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, adorned with cascading white roses and gold accents. It was the kind of venue you book when you want a fairy tale, even if the story behind it was anything but. I wore ivory, not white, not cream, a fitted dress with delicate beadwork that caught the light when I moved. No dramatic train, no elaborate veil, just me, understated, but present. I walked through the venue watching staff arrange place cards with meticulous precision. The string quartet rehearsed in the corner, their melody floating like ghosts between marble columns. Everything perfect, everything planned. My fiancé, James, was somewhere in another room with his grooms. We'd kept the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony. Ironic, considering what would happen later. My sister, Vanessa, floated into the bridal suite, wearing her maid of honor dress, a dusty rose gown that complemented her glowing skin. She was radiant in a way I hadn't seen before, eyes bright, cheeks flushed. I attributed it to excitement for my big day. I was wrong. "Eliza, you look stunning," she gushed, embracing me carefully to disturbing my dress. Her perfume was too strong, almost smothering. "This is going to be the most magical day." I smiled back, no hint of suspicion clouding my mind. "Thanks, I can hardly believe it's finally happening." My mother entered then, already dabbing at invisible tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. "My beautiful girls," she sighed, gathering us both in her arms. The two brightest stars in my sky. I noticed how her gaze lingered on Vanessa a beat longer, how her hand rested protectively on my sister's shoulder. I'd seen this my entire life. The subtle preference, the unspoken hierarchy. Vanessa was the golden child, the perfect daughter who fulfilled every expectation. I was the reliable one, the practical one who worked twice as hard for half the recognition. As we prepared for the ceremony, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Can't wait to see you. Love you always." I clutched it to my chest, warmth spreading through me. Despite everything, despite the subtle jabs from my family about how I'd finally found someone, despite the whispers that James was surprisingly good for me, I felt lucky, chosen, loved. The photographer arrived, directing us into poses. "Bride and mother," she called, then "bride and maid of honor." When Vanessa stood beside me, her arms slipped around my waist, her fingers digging slightly into my side. I thought it was excitement. Later I'd recognize it as possession. "Have you told her yet?" I overheard my mother whisper to Vanessa when they thought I was distracted. "Not yet," my sister replied. "Today isn't the right time." I assumed they were talking about a wedding surprise, some heartfelt toast or meaningful gift. How blind I was. How willfully oblivious to the signals flashing right before my eyes. The hour approached. Guests filtered into the ballroom, taking their seats among arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus. Through the crack in the door I watched James take his position at the altar, handsome in his tailored suit, nervous hands adjusting his cuff. My father appeared beside me, offering his arm with a stiff smile. "Ready?" he asked, not quite meeting my eye. "I've been ready for this my whole life," I replied, not knowing the true weight of those words. The music swelled, doors opened, and I began the long walk toward what I thought was my future. James's face lit up when he saw me. Genuine happiness, or so I believed. Our eyes locked, his smile widening. I felt beautiful, cherished, complete. The ceremony proceeded like a dream. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, about honoring truth and supporting each other through life's challenges. James and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. His voice caught when he promised to always be honest, to protect my heart above all else. The irony would sting later. Rings were exchanged, a kiss shared. Applause erupted as we turned to face our guests, as husband and wife. In that moment, surrounded by smiling faces and floating rose petals, I was truly happy. It would be the last time I felt that way that day. The reception began with cocktails and passed hors d'oeuvres. James and I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, posing for photos, stealing kisses that felt electric with promise. My hand rarely left his, our fingers intertwined like we couldn't bear the separation. If I'd been more observant, I might have noticed how his gaze drifted to Vanessa across the room, how she touched her stomach absently when their eyes met. Dinner was served, champagne poured. The toasts began, my father's stiff but affectionate words, James's best man sharing appropriately embarrassing stories. Then Vanessa rose, champagne flute in hand, her dress catching the light like she was wrapped in rose gold. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've known Eliza her entire life, she began, her voice carrying across the silent room. We've shared everything, clothes, secrets, dreams. A knowing smile played at her lips. Some might say we've shared too much. A smattering of confused laughter rippled through the guests. I felt the first prickle of unease crawl up my spine. But today isn't just about celebrating Eliza and James's love, Vanessa continued. It's about family, about new beginnings in all form. Her free hand drifted to her stomach, resting there with deliberate tenderness. Which is why I wanted to share some news of my own on this special day. The room fell absolutely silent. My mother's eyes shone with anticipation. My father studied his plate. James, my husband of barely 2 hours, had gone completely still beside me. I'm expecting, Vanessa announced, her voice ringing with triumph rather than joy. I'm going to be a mother. Applause broke out, confused but enthusiastic. I clapped automatically, smile frozen in place, wondering why she'd chosen my wedding day for this announcement. It felt inappropriate, but not malicious. Not. Then Vanessa turned directly to me, her eyes holding mine with a challenge I'd never seen before. Aren't you going to ask who the father is? Eliza? The room hushed immediately. Someone gasped. My mother's smile became fixed, brittle. Vanessa, my father warned, rising slightly from his seat, but my sister continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the ballroom. It's his, she said, nodding toward James. It's been his for months. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. I felt every eye in the room turn to me, waiting for the breakdown, the screaming, the collapse. James reached for my hand beneath the table, his touch desperate, pleading. I didn't give them what they expected. Instead, I smiled. Not a hurt smile, not an angry one. The kind of smile you wear when puzzle pieces finally click into place. I reached for my clutch, removed my phone, and stood slowly. I thought you might say that, I said, my voice steadier than I thought possible, which is why I came prepared. I connected my phone to the reception sound system, a capability I'd confirmed with the DJ weeks earlier, claiming I wanted to play a special song. What played instead was a video, one I'd discovered 3 days before the wedding, but kept to myself, waiting for the right moment. On the large screen behind the head table appeared Vanessa and James in his car, unaware they were being recorded by the dashboard camera I'd installed after noticing strange mileage on our shared vehicle. She doesn't suspect anything, James said on screen. After the wedding, we'll wait a month, then I'll ask for a divorce. I'll say I made a mistake. Vanessa laughed. And the pregnancy? We'll say it happened after, James replied. No one will do the math. You're sure about this? Vanessa asked. About us? I've always been sure, James answered. It's always been you. The video continued, revealing more details of their plan, how they'd orchestrated meetings behind my back for over a year, how they planned to use James's connection to my family business to secure his position even after the divorce, how Vanessa had deliberately gotten pregnant to ensure he couldn't back out. I let it play for exactly 3 minutes, long enough for there to be no question, no possibility of misunderstanding or explanation. Then I stopped it, the frozen image of their betrayal hovering like an accusation above our wedding dinner. I discovered this 3 days ago, I said into the stunned silence. I could have canceled everything, caused a scene, exposed you both privately, but I realized something. I wanted witnesses. I wanted everyone to see who you really are. I turned to our guests, many of whom were staring open-mouthed, forks suspended midair. I apologize for the unconventional entertainment. The good news is, the cake is excellent, and I've paid for an open bar until midnight. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. With that, I removed my wedding ring, placed it gently beside James's plate, and walked out of the ballroom. No tears, no shouting, no dramatic exit. Just the steady click of my heels against marble and the deafening silence behind me. In the bridal suite, I changed quickly into the clothes I'd hidden earlier. A simple black dress, practical heels. I'd known, somewhere deep inside, that I might need an escape plan. As I zipped my wedding dress into its garment bag, the door burst open. My mother stood there, face contorted with anger and embarrassment. "How could you?" she demanded. "Humiliating your sister, James. Our entire family in front of everyone we know." I stared at her, really seeing her for the first time. "That's your response? Not how could they betray me, but how could I expose it?" "You could have handled this privately," she hissed. "Now everyone will be talking about this disaster for years." "Good," I said simply. "They should know the truth." My father appeared behind her, ashen-faced. "Eliza, you've ruined everything. The connections we made with James's family, the business opportunities." "So that's what this was about," I said, understanding washing over me like cold water. "Not my happiness, but what my marriage could do for you." They didn't deny it. They couldn't. I shouldered my bag and moved toward the door. My mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging painfully into my skin. "Where do you think you're going?" "We need to do damage control," she insisted. "No, we don't," I replied, gently removing her hand. "The damage was done long before today. I'm just the one who finally stopped ignoring it." As I walked out, I heard my father call after me. "This isn't just about you, Eliza." I paused, turned back one last time. "For once in my life," I said quietly, "that's exactly what it's about." Outside, the night air was cool against my heated skin. I'd arranged for a car service, anticipating I might need a quick departure. As I slid into the back seat, I didn't specify a destination. I just said, "Drive." We moved through the city, lights blurring past my window like shooting stars. I didn't cry.
Not yet.
That would come later, in private, when the shock wore off. For now, I felt strangely calm, like I'd stepped out of a fog I hadn't even realized I was in. My phone buzzed continuously. James, Vanessa, my parents, friends who had witnessed everything. I silenced it without looking, then powered it off completely. Tonight, I would be unreachable. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face the aftermath. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Rough night?" he asked kindly. I met his eyes and found myself smiling, a small, genuine expression that surprised me. "Actually," I said, "I think it might be the first honest night I've had in years." He nodded, understanding without needing details. "Where to, then?" I considered for a moment. "The Harborview Hotel," I decided. "A place no one would think to look for me, where I could be anonymous for one night." In the hotel room, I stood by the window overlooking the city light. The woman reflected in the glass looked different somehow. Shoulders straighter, eyes clearer, like shedding an ill-fitting dress I'd left behind the role I'd played for so long. The accommodating daughter, the trusting fiancé, the person who ignored red flags to keep peace. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly alone. And for the first time, that didn't feel like failure. I pulled out my grandmother's letter from my bag, the one she'd written me before she died, that I carried with me always. "Remember, Eliza," she'd written, "sometimes the bravest thing is not to fight for someone else's version of love, but to walk away and find your own." As I traced her handwriting with my finger, I finally allowed myself to cry, not just for today's betrayal, but for all the times I'd compromised myself to earn love that should have been freely given. By morning, I would begin rebuilding. But tonight I honored the ending. I didn't sleep that night at the Harborview Hotel. Instead, I watched the city lights slowly fade as dawn crept across the skyline. By 6 in the morning, I had a plan. Not a perfect one, but a starting point. I showered, pulled my hair back and put on the spare clothes I'd packed in my emergency bag. It was a habit I'd developed years ago. Always have an escape route. I never thought I'd need one on my wedding day. When I finally turned my phone back on, it nearly vibrated off the nightstand with notifications. 43 missed calls, 97 text messages, 28 voicemails. I ignored them all and made a single call to Morgan, my oldest friend and the only bridesmaid who wasn't related to either family. Eliza. My God, she answered immediately. Are you okay? Where are you? I need a favor, I said, my voice calmer than I expected. Can you go to the apartment and pack some essentials for me? Clothes, documents from my office, the blue box in my closet. James shouldn't be there. He's probably with Vanessa or hiding at his parents'. Morgan didn't hesitate. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Where should I bring everything? The coffee shop on Westlake, the one with the blue awning. It was public enough to be safe, private enough for what I needed. I'm on it, she said, then paused. Liz, what you did last night, it was incredible. Terrible and heartbreaking, but incredible. I closed my eyes briefly. It doesn't feel incredible. It feels necessary. After hanging up, I scrolled through my messages, not reading them fully, but getting the gist. James bounced between desperate apologies and angry accusations. Vanessa had sent nothing, her silence more telling than any word. My parents' messages escalated from demands that I fix this situation immediately, to threats about family support and emotional manipulation. Only one message gave me pause, from my grandmother's former attorney, Patricia Miles. Eliza, I've been trying to reach you. There are matters regarding your grandmother's estate that require urgent attention. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I frowned at the screen. Grandma Rose had passed away 8 months ago. Her estate had been settled. A modest inheritance split between me and Vanessa, with a few personal items designated specifically. What could possibly be urgent now? I made a mental note to call Patricia after meeting Morgan, then gathered my few belongings and checked out of the hotel. The morning air felt different somehow, crisper, cleaner, like the world had been washed fresh after a storm. At the coffee shop, I claimed a corner table and ordered a strong black coffee. The barista glanced curiously at me, perhaps recognizing something in my expression, the look of someone whose life had just imploded. She added a chocolate biscotti to my order without charging me. Small kindnesses sometimes hit the hardest. Morgan arrived 30 minutes later, struggling with 2 large duffel bags and my laptop case. Her face was a mixture of concern and fierce protectiveness as she slid into the seat across from me. I grabbed everything I could think of, she said, pushing a set of keys across the table. And I changed your locks. I blinked in surprise. You what? Changed your locks, she repeated firmly. James still has keys, and after what he's done, I wouldn't put anything past him. My brother's a locksmith, remember? He came right over. Tears pricked at my eyes for the first time since I'd left the reception. Not from sadness, but from the simple act of someone protecting me when I'd felt so exposed. Thank you, I whispered. Morgan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What's your next move? I took a deep breath. First, I need somewhere to stay. Then I need to talk to Patricia Miles about my grandmother's estate. After that, I'm not Stay with me, Morgan offered immediately. Sam's away on business for 2 weeks. You can have the guest room for as long as you need. I nodded gratefully. Just for a few days, until I figure things out. Now, Morgan said, leaning forward, tell me what you need. Not what you think you should do, not what would make everyone else comfortable. What do you need right now? The question caught me off guard. What did I need? For so long my needs had been secondary. To my parents' expectations, to Vanessa's desires, to James's plan. I'd become so accustomed to accommodating others, that identifying my own needs felt like trying to recall a language I'd once known, but long forgotten. Space, I finally said. Space to think, and time to understand how I missed all the signs. Morgan nodded. Then that's what you'll get. We finished our coffee, loaded my belongings into her car, and drove to her apartment in comfortable silence. The guest room was small but welcoming, with a window overlooking a courtyard garden. I set my bags down and immediately called Patricia Miles. "Eliza, thank you for calling back," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "I understand you've had quite an eventful week." "News traveled fast. You could say that," I replied neutrally. "I need to see you in person," Patricia continued. "There are documents your grandmother left that were to be delivered under specific circumstances. Those circumstances have now been met." "What circumstances?" I asked, confused. She was very clear that these papers were to be given to you only in the event of, and I quote, "a significant betrayal by family members. From what I understand about your wedding yesterday, that condition has been satisfied." A chill ran through me. How could Grandma Rose have anticipated this? She'd passed away before I even met James. "I can come to your office this afternoon," I said. 3 o'clock, Patricia confirmed. "And Eliza? Bring identification. There are financial matters involved." After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process this new development. My grandmother had always been perceptive, seeing dynamics in our family that others missed. She'd been the only one who never compared me to Vanessa, who valued my practical nature and quiet determination. When she died, I'd lost my strongest ally. Morgan appeared in the doorway with a cup of tea. "Everything okay?" I explained the mysterious call from Patricia. "It's strange," I concluded, almost like she knew something like this would happen. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," Morgan said, sitting beside me. "Maybe she just understood your family better than anyone." We spent the rest of the morning in companionable quiet. I showered again, trying to wash away the lingering scent of wedding flowers that seemed to cling to my skin. Morgan lent me a soft sweater and jeans, clothes with no memories attached. I was examining my face in the bathroom mirror, noticing how different I looked just one day after what should have been the happiest moment of my life, when my phone rang. "Jane." I stared at his name on the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. Then, surprising myself, I answered. "Eliza," he breathed, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God. Where are you? We need to talk." "No, we don't," I said quietly. "There's nothing to discuss." "Please," he begged. "It's not what you think. Vanessa and I were having an affair for over a year," I finished for him. "We're planning to use our marriage as a cover until you could conveniently leave me. Got her pregnant deliberately." Did I miss anything? His silence confirmed everything. "Why did you go through with the wedding?" I asked, the question that had been burning in me since I'd discovered the truth. He hesitated. "Your family's connections, the business opportunity with your father. We thought it would be easier this way." The cold calculation of it stole my breath. "Easier for whom?" "For everyone," he insisted. "You'd have your perfect wedding day, and then later, when things didn't work out, I'd have been devastated either way." I interrupted. "But you didn't care about that, did you? As long as you got what you wanted." "I did care about you, Eliza. Just not the way you deserved." Something in his tone, regretful but not truly remorseful, solidified my resolve. "I'm filing for annulment tomorrow," I said. "Don't contact me again. My lawyer will be in touch." I hung up before he could respond, then blocked his number. One clean cut was better than 1,000 small ones. At precisely 3 o'clock, I sat across from Patricia Miles in her elegantly appointed office. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, her eyes sharp behind designer glasses. She studied me for a moment before speaking. "Your grandmother was an extraordinary woman," she began, "with exceptional force. What I'm about to share with you was arranged 8 months before her death, with explicit instructions about when it should be revealed." Patricia opened a folder on her desk and removed several documents, along with a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. "Rose came to me with concerns about your family dynamics," Patricia explained. "She worried that your generosity and loyalty were being exploited, particularly by your sister and parent." I swallowed hard. "She never said anything to me. She didn't want to prejudice you against them. She hoped she was wrong." Patricia slid the first document toward me. "This is the deed to her lake house property, the one your family believes was sold to cover medical expenses." I stared at the paper in shock. The lake house had been our summer retreat growing up, a beautiful 3-bedroom cabin on Silver Lake. We'd all been disappointed when Grandma Rose had supposedly sold it during her final illness. She never sold it, Patricia continued. She placed it in a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. Your parents and sister were not to be informed unless certain conditions occur. What conditions? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. Evidence of deliberate betrayal or exploitation by family members. Patricia handed me another document. Additionally, there's this investment account. Your grandmother was quite shrewd with her saving. The current value is approximately $780,000. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. That's not possible. Grandma lived modestly. She was a school librarian. Patricia smiled slightly. Who invested very wisely over 50 years and never flaunted her success. She wanted you to have financial independence, especially if family pressure became problematic. Finally, Patricia handed me the sealed envelope. This is personal. She asked that you read it privately. I took it with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of my grandmother's foresight like a blanket around my shoulders. How had she known? What had she seen that I'd been blind to? There's one more thing, Patricia said, her tone softening. Rose left specific instructions that if these documents were ever activated, I was to tell you something. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. Standing your ground isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. Tears filled my eyes. It was exactly what Grandma Rose would have said. I left Patricia's office in a daze, the documents secure in my bag, the unopened letter burning a hole in my pocket. The world looked different somehow. Sharper, clearer, as if I'd been viewing everything through a smudged lens that had suddenly been wiped clean. Instead of returning directly to Morgan's, I found myself driving to Silver Lake, to the property that was now apparently mine. It was a 40-minute journey outside the city, the road winding through pine forests that grew denser as I approached the water. The lake house stood just as I remembered, weathered gray cedar with blue shutters, a wide porch facing the water. I sat in the car for several minutes, staring at it, before finally gathering the courage to approach. The key Patricia had given me turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, everything was covered with dust sheets, furniture preserved like memories waiting to be uncovered. I moved through the rooms slowly, pulling back covers to reveal the familiar couch where I'd read countless books, the dining table where we'd played board games during summer storms, the old piano Grandma had taught me to play on. In the master bedroom, I found a surprise. A small desk by the window, cleared of dust covers, with a lamp and a comfortable chair. On its surface was a single sheet of paper with 2 words in my grandmother's handwriting. Welcome. My legs gave way and I sank into the chair, finally opening the letter she'd left with Patricia. My dearest Eliza, it began. If you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. Your generous heart has been taken advantage of once too often. I've watched for years as your parents favored Vanessa, as they taught you that your worth was measured by what you could provide for others rather than who you are. I stayed silent too often, hoping they would recognize the treasure they had in you. That was my mistake, and I'm sorry for it. This house is yours now. Truly yours, not the family's. Not to be shared unless you choose to do so. The money is your security, your freedom to build a life on your terms. Use it wisely, but remember it's meant to liberate you, not bind you to obligation. You've spent your life making room for others, Eliza. It's time to make room for yourself. Your kindness is not weakness. It's your greatest strength. But kindness without boundaries becomes self-destruction. I wish I could be there to see the woman you'll become once you stop dimming your light for those who prefer shadows. Know that I saw you, truly saw you, and you were always enough. All my love, Grandma Rose. I clutched the letter to my chest and finally allowed myself to weep. Not just for the betrayal of James and Vanessa, not just for my parents' conditional love, but for the years I'd spent believing I was somehow less deserving of happiness than others. As the sun began to set over the lake, casting long golden reflections across the water, I made my first independent decision. I would stay here tonight, in this house that was now mine. I would sleep in clean sheets, wake to birdsong instead of city noise, and begin to imagine a future shaped by my own desires rather than others' expectations. I texted Morgan to let her know I was safe, then turned off my phone again. Tomorrow would bring complications, legal battles, family confrontations, the dismantling of the life I'd planned. But tonight was for healing, for remembering who I was before I learned to make myself small. I found sheets in the linen closet, still fresh in vacuum-sealed bags Grandma must have prepared. As I made up the bed in what had always been my room, I noticed a small journal on the nightstand. Opening it, I discovered it was empty except for an inscription on the first page. Some endings are really beginnings in disguise. Write your story, Eliza. Make it a good one. That night, I slept better than I had in years, wrapped in the quiet certainty that while I hadn't chosen this path, I could choose where it led from here. For the first time in my adult life, the future felt like an open door rather than a narrow hallway. Morning came with soft light filtering through curtains I'd forgotten to close. For a moment, I lay still, remembering everything. The wedding, the video, the revelation at Patricia's office. Then, instead of the crushing weight I'd expected, I felt something unexpected. Possibility. I rose, made coffee in the old percolator Grandma had always used, and carried it out to the dock. The lake was still in the early light, mist rising from its surface like secrets being whispered into the air. I sat with my feet dangling above the water, feeling small and yet somehow more substantial than I had in years. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, showed more missed calls and messages. But one stood out, from my father, sent just an hour ago. We've spoken with James. This situation can still be salvaged. Come home and we'll discuss damage control. I stared at those words, damage control, as if they were written in a foreign language. They wanted to control the damage to their reputation, their business connections, their carefully constructed facade of family perfection. Not the damage to my heart, my trust, my future. I typed a response, simple and clear. There's nothing to salvage. I'm where I need to be. Then I set my phone aside and opened the journal Grandma had left. On the first blank page, I wrote the date and a single sentence. Today, I begin again. I spent the next 3 days at the lake house, cleaning away dust and making small repairs with tools I found in the shed. Each sweep of the broom felt like clearing away not just cobwebs, but old patterns. Each fixed hinge or tightened screw was a tiny step toward rebuilding myself. The physical work kept my hands busy while my mind processed everything that had happened. On the fourth morning, as I sat on the porch with coffee watching a family of ducks glide across the still water, my phone rang. I'd been expecting calls from my family, from James, even from wedding guests with morbid curiosity. But the name that flashed on my screen surprised me. Olivia Bennett, my boss at the architectural firm where I'd worked for 5 years. Eliza, she said, when I answered, her voice warm but cautious. How are you holding up? I hadn't told anyone at work about the wedding disaster. You heard? Small professional world, she replied. James's father mentioned something to one of our clients, who mentioned it to me. I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. James's father was a commercial real estate developer who often worked with our firm. The professional fallout was beginning. I'm managing, I said simply. I'll be back at work next week. That's actually why I'm calling, Olivia said, her tone shifting to something more hesitant. James's father expressed concerns about your continued involvement in the Westridge project. The Westridge project was a major development I'd been leading for months, the biggest opportunity of my career so far. On what grounds? I asked, though I already knew. He suggested there might be emotional complications that could compromise professional relationships. I could hear the quotation marks in her voice. The discomfort. I told him that was absurd, of course. But he's threatening to pull the contract unless we reassign the project. Cold anger settled in my stomach. They weren't just trying to control the personal narrative. They were coming after my professional life too. What do you need from me? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Olivia sighed. Legally, I can fight this. It's inappropriate interference. But practically speaking, I need to know if you want me to. This could get messy, Eliza. I thought about the investment account Grandma Rose had left me, about the lake house, about the freedom to make choices based on integrity rather than necessity. I won't step down, I said firmly. If you need to reassign me to keep the contract, I understand, but I won't volunteer to leave a project I've poured myself into, because James and his family are uncomfortable. Good, Olivia said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That's what I hoped you'd say. I've already told Philip Bennett that if he wants to pull the contract over personal vendettas, We'll not only dispute it legally but make sure every developer in the region knows why. Relief washed through me. Thank you for standing by me. You're my best project architect. Eliza, I'm not losing you because some men can't separate business from bruised egos. She paused. Take the time you need. The Westridge plans will be waiting when you get back. After hanging up, I felt something shift inside me. A straightening of my spine, a lifting of a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged. I had allies. I wasn't alone in this fight. That afternoon I drove into the small town near the lake to buy groceries. The local market was small but well stocked, with wooden floors that creaked underfoot, and handwritten signs describing local produce. As I examined a display of apples, a voice spoke behind me. Those Honeycrisps are from the Mackenzie orchard, best in the county. I turned to find an older woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes watching me. She smiled. You're Rose Harrington's granddaughter, aren't you? The quiet one. Something about being described that way, the quiet one, struck. It was how I'd always been labeled, often in comparison to Vanessa, the responsible one, the serious one, the one who wouldn't cause a scene. I'm Eliza, I said, offering my hand. Margaret Chen, she replied, her handshake firm. I owned the bookstore in town. Your grandmother was one of my best customers and dearest friends. We all wondered what happened to the lake house after she passed. It's been in a trust, I explained. I only just found out it's mine. Margaret nodded as if this made perfect sense. Rose always said you were the one who truly loved that place. Are you staying long? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. I'm in transition. Her eyes crinkled with understanding. Those can be the most important times in our lives. The transitions. When everything feels uncertain, that's when we have the most freedom to choose. As I paid for my groceries, Margaret handed me her card. The bookstore is my daughter's now, but I run a community workshop space next door. We have everything from pottery classes to financial planning seminars. Come by sometime if you need company that doesn't ask too many questions. I tucked the card into my pocket, touched by the simple kindness of connection without expectation. Back at the lake house, I was preparing dinner when headlights swept across the front window. My heart jumped to my throat. No one knew I was here except Morgan and Patricia Miles. I moved to the window cautiously and peered out. A sleek black SUV had pulled up in the drive. As I watched, my mother emerged from the driver's side, my father from the passenger seat. They stood for a moment, surveying the property with identical expressions of calculation. I stepped onto the porch before they could reach the door. How did you find me? I asked, not bothering with greetings. My mother's smile was tight, professional, the same smile she used at charity events when speaking to donors. Eliza, darling, you're not that difficult to track down. Your grandmother's attorney's office wasn't exactly discreet. What do you want? I remained in the doorway, not inviting them in. My father cleared his throat. We need to discuss how we're moving forward from this unfortunate situation. We've been doing damage control for days, my mother added. The story we're putting out is that James had cold feet, that you both realized it was a mistake before anything was finalized. I stared at them incredulously. Before anything was finalized, we were pronounced husband and wife. There were 200 witnesses. Legal technicalities can be handled, my father said dismissively. The important thing is salvaging the family's reputation and your future prospects. My future prospects, I repeated slowly. Yes, dear. My mother stepped closer, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. This doesn't have to define you. We can spin this, make you the sympathetic figure. In 6 months, no one will remember the details, just that you showed dignity in a difficult time. And what about Vanessa? I asked. How are you spinning her pregnancy with my husband? My parents exchanged a glance. Vanessa and James have decided to be discreet for a while, my father said carefully. They'll wait an appropriate period before making their relationship public. So the plan is to pretend the wedding simply didn't work out. Wait a few months. Then announce Vanessa and James as a couple with a miraculous early baby. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. It's the best solution for everyone, my mother insisted. Including you, Eliza. This way you're not the victim of a public humiliation. You're just someone who made a mature decision to end a relationship that wasn't right. I looked between them, these people who had raised me, who should have been my strongest defender. And what about the truth? What about the fact that they betrayed me, planned it methodically, and would have continued deceiving me if I hadn't discovered it myself? My father sighed heavily. The truth isn't always helpful, Eliza. Sometimes it just causes pain. The truth already caused pain, I said quietly. Hiding it only protects the people who caused it. My mother's facade cracked slightly. Why are you being so difficult? This affects all of us. Your sister is pregnant, for heaven's sake. She needs family support, not public scandal. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of a thread pulled beyond its tension point. My sister, I said, each word deliberate, slept with my fiancé for over a year. She got pregnant, deliberately. She announced it at my wedding. And your concern is for her reputation. She made a mistake. My mother countered. A serious one. Yes, but she's still your sister. And I'm still your daughter, I replied. But that doesn't seem to factor into your calculation. My father stepped forward, his business negotiation face firmly in place. Liza, be reasonable. We have the Bennett contract to consider. Your emotional reaction is jeopardizing a partnership we've worked years to secure. Yeah, I said, understanding washing over me. So that's why you're really here. Not because you're concerned about me, but because the Bennetts are threatening to pull out of business deals. It's all connected, he insisted. Family, business, reputation, these things don't exist in isolation. I looked at them both, really looked at them, and felt a strange calm settle over me. I'm not signing anything, agreeing to any story, or playing any role in this cover-up. I'm filing for annulment based on fraud, and I'm not hiding why. My mother's face hardened. Then you leave us no choice. If you insist on this destructive path, we'll have to distance ourselves publicly, make it clear that your actions aren't supported by the family. My actions? I repeated, incredulously. You mean my refusal to pretend my sister and husband didn't betray me? Your insistence on public drama, my father corrected. Your grandmother would be ashamed of how you're handling this. That was a miscalculation on his part. I smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. Actually, I think Grandma Rose knew exactly what kind of family dynamics I was dealing with. Why else would she have left me this house and financial security in secret, with instructions that I should only receive them in case of significant betrayal by family members? Their expressions shifted simultaneously, shock, then calculation, then a careful neutrality that told me everything I needed to know. What financial security? My father asked too casually. The kind that means I don't need to worry about the Bennett contract or family support, I replied. The kind that means I can make decisions based on truth rather than convenience. My mother's voice turned cold. You've changed, Eliza. I don't recognize this person. Good, I said simply, because the person you recognized let herself be used as a pawn for years. I'm not that person anymore. They left shortly after, their departure marked by thinly veiled threats about family loyalty and consequences. I watched their taillights disappear down the driveway, expecting to feel grief or anxiety. Instead, I felt lighter. Clear. I returned to my half-prepared dinner, chopping vegetables with newfound precision. Each slice of the knife felt decisive, intentional. I was cutting away more than carrots and onions. I was severing ties to patterns that had bound me for too long. That night, I called Morgan to update her on my parents' visit. They actually expected me to go along with a cover story, I told her, still amazed by their audacity. Are you surprised? Morgan asked gently. They've always expected you to accommodate whatever narrative worked best for them. I guess I thought betrayal this significant would shift their perspective, I admitted, that they'd finally see things from my side. People who've spent decades viewing the world one way don't suddenly change their lens, but you've changed yours and that's what matters. We talked for nearly an hour, about practical things like forwarding my mail to the lake house, about emotional things like the strange grief of losing family bonds that were already damaged. As we were about to hang up, Morgan hesitated. There's something else you should know, she said reluctantly. Vanessa's been telling people that you knew about her and James all along, that you had an arrangement, but changed your mind when you found out she was pregnant. The blood rushed to my face. That's absurd. I have the video of them plotting behind my back. I know, Morgan soothed. Anyone who knows you knows it's a lie, but she's desperate to salvage her reputation, and apparently this is the angle she's trying. After hanging up, I paced the length of the porch, anger coursing through me like electricity seeking ground. The audacity of it to betray me, then attempt to paint me as the villain in their story. I wanted to call Vanessa, to confront her directly, to demand she stop spreading lies. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I opened my laptop, navigated to my rarely used social media account, and wrote a simple, direct post. In response to rumors circulating, no, I did not know about or consent to my husband's affair with my sister. No, there was no arrangement. Yes, I have evidence of their deception, which I've shared with those who need to know. I won't be commenting further or engaging in public debate about private pain. The truth stands on its own. I hit post before I could second-guess myself, then closed the laptop. It wasn't a dramatic tell-all. It wasn't even particularly emotional, but it was clear, direct and unambiguous. Qualities I was increasingly valuing in myself and others. The next morning, I woke to dozens of notifications and messages of support, but one in particular caught my attention. From Carter Reynolds, James's best man and childhood friend. Eliza, I need to talk to you. It's important. Things aren't what they seem with James and Vanessa. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the delete button. I'd had enough drama, enough revelation, but something in the phrasing made me pause. I typed a brief reply, I'm listening. His response came quickly, not over message. Can I meet you somewhere public tomorrow? I have something you need to see. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in town, the following afternoon, curiosity overcoming my wariness. What could he possibly have to show me that would change anything about the situation? The rest of the day I focused on practical matters, contacting an attorney about the annulment, beginning the process of officially changing my address, making a list of renovations the lake house needed. I threw myself into creating order from chaos, finding comfort in tangible progress. That evening, as I sat on the dock watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Hello? I answered cautiously. Eliza, it's Margaret Chen from the market. The warm voice was instantly recognizable. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the community board list your grandmother maintained. Not at all, I said, surprised but pleased. What can I do for you? Actually, it's what I might be able to do for you, Margaret replied. I understand, you're an architect, and our town council is looking for someone to consult on the renovation of the old boathouse into a community center. It's a small project, but it could be interesting. Would you be willing to take a look? The offer caught me off guard. How did you know I'm an architect? Margaret chuckled. Small towns have long memories, dear. Rose talked about your career with such pride. She used to bring in your designs to show everyone at our book club. A lump formed in my throat. I hadn't known that my grandmother had been sharing my work, celebrating my achievements in ways my parents never had. I'd be happy to take a look, I said, my voice slightly husky with emotion. When would be a good time? Tomorrow morning. I could show you the site, introduce you to a few council members. No pressure, just a conversation. After agreeing to meet at 10, I sat for a long time as darkness fell over the lake. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with legal complications and emotional landmines, but for the first time, it also contained possibilities that were entirely my own, not shaped by family expectations or others' needs, but by my own choices. I slept deeply that night, dreamless and calm. Whatever Carter had to show me tomorrow, whatever complications still lay ahead with James and Vanessa, I would face them on my terms. The woman who had stood frozen in shock at her own wedding reception was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who recognized that strength sometimes comes not from enduring pain, but from refusing to accept it as inevitable. As dawn broke over the lake, I stood on the porch with coffee, watching mist rise from the water's surface. Today, I whispered to myself, I move forward, not. The words felt like a promise. To myself, to the memory of my grandmother, to the future I was only just beginning to imagine. A future built not on what I was running from, but on what I was running toward. The morning meeting with Margaret and the town council went better than I could have anticipated. The old boathouse was a beautiful structure, all weathered wood and large windows facing the lake, neglected but full of potential. As I walked through it, my architect's mind automatically began cataloging possibilities: exposed beams, natural light, a deck extending over the water. "What do you think?" asked George Patel, the council president, watching me sketch quick ideas in my notebook. "Can it be saved?" "Absolutely," I replied, running my hand along a solid oak support column. "The bones are excellent. It needs work, but nothing structural concerns me at first glance." By the end of the tour, I'd agreed to draft an initial proposal for the renovation. It would be a small project compared to the corporate developments I usually handle, but there was something appealing about creating a space that would serve the community rather than just generate profit. As we walked back toward town, Margaret fell into step beside me. "You remind me of Rose," she said unexpectedly. "Not in appearance, but in how you observe before speaking, how you see potential where others might see problems." "She was the strongest person I knew," I said, surprised by how easily the words came. I never told her that enough. Margaret smiled gently. "She knew. Trust me on." She hesitated, then added, "Rose worried about you though. Said you'd learn to make yourself smaller to keep peace in your family." The observation was so accurate it stopped me in my track. "She said that many times. She also said that someday you'd recognize your own worth, and when that happened, you'd be unstoppable." Margaret patted my arm. "I think she'd be pleased to see you now, standing in your truth." I swallowed hard against the emotion rising in my throat. "I hope so." After parting ways with Margaret, I had 2 hours before my meeting with Carter. I used the time to walk through the small lakeside town, seeing it through new eyes. The local coffee shop with its mismatched furniture and art by local students, the hardware store where the owner greeted each customer by name, the community garden where elderly residents worked alongside young families. This place had been our summer retreat growing up, but I'd never really seen it as a potential home. Now, I could envision a life here, slower perhaps, than city living, but richer in ways I was just beginning to appreciate. At precisely 2 o'clock I walked into the coffee shop Margaret had recommended. Carter was already there, seated at a corner table, looking nervous. He stood when he saw me, uncertainty written across his face. "Eliza, thank you for coming," he said as I sat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I admit." "What's this about, Carter?" He pushed a manila folder across the table. "Before I show you this, I need you to know I only discovered it 3 days ago. If I'd known earlier, I would have warned you before the wedding." Warily, I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, of James with different women. Some appeared to be from years ago, others more recent. None were with Vanessa. "What is this?" I asked, confusion replacing weariness. Carter leaned forward, speaking quietly. "James has been doing this for years, dating women from wealthy or well-connected families, ingratiating himself with their parents, leveraging the relationships for business opportunities. He's never been faithful to anyone." I flipped through the photos, recognizing some of the women from mentions in James's past. "How did you get these?" His previous girlfriend hired a private investigator after suspecting he was cheating. "She sent me these last week, after seeing our wedding announcement." I was going to confront him, but then everything happened at the reception. Carter ran a hand through his hair. "Vanessa isn't special to him, Eliza. She's just his latest target. And your family's business connections are what he really wants." I sat back, attempting to process this new information. "But Vanessa is pregnant." Carter hesitated. Have you seen any medical confirmation of that?" A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "You think she's lying about the pregnancy?" "I think they're both manipulative people who found each other," Carter said carefully. "And I think they underestimated you." There was more in the folder. Bank statements showing transfers from previous girlfriend's family businesses to James's account. Emails discussing investment opportunities that materialized after relationships began. A pattern so clear and calculating it made me dizzy. "Why are you showing me this?" I finally asked. "James was your best friend." Carter looked genuinely pained. "Was is the operative word. I've ignored too much for too long. making excuses for him because we've known each other since childhood. But what he did to you, that was the final straw. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. I studied him, looking for ulterior motives, and finding none. Thank you for this, I said finally. It doesn't change what happened, but it helps to understand the bigger picture. After Carter left, I remained at the table, staring into my untouched coffee. The revelation should have hurt. Another layer of betrayal, another indication of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. Instead, it felt strangely liberating. This hadn't been about me. Not really. I hadn't been singled out for betrayal because I was lacking or unworthy. I'd simply been a target in a long-established pattern. As I drove back to the lake house, a plan began forming in my mind. Not a plan for revenge, that held no appeal anymore, but a plan for resolution, for closure that would allow me to move forward without the weight of unanswered questions. That evening, I made 3 phone calls, the first to my lawyer, updating him on the new information and discussing how it might affect the annulment proceedings. The second to Morgan, asking her to gather specific items from my old apartment. The third was the hardest, to Vanessa. She answered on the first ring, her voice wary. Eliza, we need to talk, I said calmly. In person, not about reconciliation or forgiveness, but about facts. A long pause followed. What kind of fact? The kind that might make you reconsider your current path. I kept my tone neutral, informational. I'll be at Grandma Rose's lake house tomorrow at noon. Come alone, or don't come at all. Before she could respond, I added, this isn't a trap or an ambush, Vanessa. It's an opportunity for clarity. What you do with it is your choice. I hung up without waiting for her answer, then walked out to the dock. The evening was cool, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I sat with my feet dangling above the water, feeling surprisingly calm. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was prepared. Not armored for battle, but grounded in truth. The next morning, I rose early and prepared the house for Vanessa's potential visit. Not in the way I once would have, frantically cleaning, arranging things to create the perfect impression, but simply making the space ready for an important conversation. I placed the folder Carter had given me on the coffee table, along with documentation from my lawyer about the annulment proceedings. At 11:55, I heard a car approaching. From the window, I watched Vanessa park beside my car and sit for several minutes before finally emerging. She looked different than she had at the wedding. Less triumphant, more cautious. She'd exchanged her usual polished appearance for jeans and a loose sweater. If she was pregnant, it wasn't yet visible. I opened the door before she could knock. Thank you for coming. She entered hesitantly, eyes darting around the lake house. I always loved this place, she said softly. I was so upset when Grandma sold it. She never sold it, I replied, gesturing for her to sit. She left it in trust for me. Vanessa's surprise seemed genuine. Mom and Dad said. They said what they believed, or what they wanted to believe. I interrupted gently. There's a lot of that going around. She sat on the edge of the couch, her posture defensive. If you asked me here to make me feel guilty, save your breath. I already feel terrible about how everything happened. Not about what happened, just how it happened, I asked, taking the chair across from her. Vanessa flushed. You don't understand. James and I, it wasn't planned. We fell in love. When? I asked, simply. What? When did you fall in love? Before or after he and I got engaged? Before or after you agreed to be my maid of honor? Before or after you helped me choose my wedding dress? She looked away. It's complicated. Actually, it's not. I leaned forward, placing the folder within her reach. Take a look. Warily, she opened it. I watched her expression change as she flipped through the photographs. Confusion, then disbelief, then the beginning of doubt. What is this? She whispered. James's pattern. I replied evenly. You're not the first woman he's used to gain access to family connections and business opportunities. You won't be the last. She looked up sharply. That's not true. He loves me. We're having a baby together. Are you? I asked quietly. Are you really pregnant, Vanessa? Or was that part of the plan too? Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, then away. The gesture told me everything I needed to know. He said it would make the transition smoother. She said, her voice small, that people would accept us more easily if there was a baby involved, that your parents would support us financially if they thought they were helping their grandchild. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this new betrayal. And you agreed to I was going to get pregnant eventually, she defended weakly. Just, not yet. Did you know about his other women? The pattern of targeting families with business connection. She shook her head slowly, still staring at the photographs. He said I was different. Special. Her voice cracked slightly. God, I'm such an idiot. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of compassion. Vanessa had always been the golden child, the favorite, accustomed to admiration and special treatment. But she'd also been shaped by our parents' conditional love, their emphasis on appearance over substance. In some ways, she'd been as much a product of our dysfunctional family as I had been, just manifesting it differently. You're not an idiot, I said finally. You're someone who made terrible choices that hurt people who trusted you. There's a difference. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Why are you showing me this? To hurt me back? No, I said truthfully. I'm showing you because despite everything, you're my sister, and I don't want to see you become another victim in James's pattern. It's too late, she whispered. I've lost everything. My reputation, my relationship with you. Mom and Dad are furious that the Bennett deals are falling apart. It's not too late to start making better choices, I countered, beginning with the truth. The conversation that followed was long and painful. Vanessa revealed the full extent of James's manipulation, how he'd pursued her shortly after our engagement, convinced her they had a special connection, persuaded her that I was merely a stepping stone to the life they deserved together, how he'd planned every detail of their reveal at the wedding, assuring her that my parents would quickly adjust their allegiance once they understood the situation. He never expected you to fight back, she admitted. He said you'd be too embarrassed, too eager to avoid conflict. The old Eliza wouldn't have, I acknowledged. But I'm not that person anymore. By the time Vanessa left 3 hours later, something fundamental had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, that would take much longer, if it ever came at all. Not reconciliation. Too much damage had been done for an easy repair. But understanding, perhaps, and a fragile honesty that felt more real than the performative sisterhood we'd maintained for years. What will you do now? I asked as she prepared to leave. She looked around the lake house one last time, then back at me. Tell the truth, I guess. Starting with Mom and then figure out who I am when I'm not defined by being the favorite daughter, or someone's girlfriend. It's not an easy journey, I said. But it's worth. After she drove away, I sat on the porch swing for a long time, watching the afternoon light play across the lake. The conversation had been exhausting but clarifying, like lancing an infected wound. The pain was necessary for healing to begin. That evening, I returned to my grandmother's journal, the one she'd left for me to fill. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Today I faced my sister without anger or fear. I offered truth instead of accusations, clarity instead of revenge. The path ahead is still uncertain, but for the first time, I'm walking it as myself, not as the person others expected me to be." The next week passed in a blur of purposeful activity. I submitted my initial proposal for the boathouse renovation, which the town council received with enthusiasm. I finalized the annulment papers with my lawyer, who assured me the process would be straightforward given the evidence of fraud. I began interviewing contractors for updates to the lake house, not to erase my grandmother's presence, but to blend her legacy with my own vision. Morgan drove up for the weekend, bringing the last of my belongings from the city apartment. We spent Saturday painting the lake house kitchen a soft sage green that reminded me of early spring. "Have you heard from your parents?" she asked as we cleaned brushes in the utility sink. "Not directly," I replied, but apparently Vanessa kept her word about telling them the truth. Their lawyer contacted mine to ask if I'd consider keeping certain details private in exchange for an uncontested annulment. Morgan raised an eyebrow. "And will you?" I shrugged. "I'm not interested in public humiliation for its own sake. I've said what needed to be said to those who needed to hear it. The rest is just noise." On Sunday morning, as Morgan prepared to drive back to the city, she hugged me tightly. "You know what's amazing? A month ago, If someone had told you your fiancé would cheat with your sister and announce it at your wedding, you'd have thought it was the end of your world. It was the end of a world, I corrected gently, just not the right one. After she left, I walked down to the lake and sat on the dock, watching a pair of herons fishing in the shallows. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Chen, inviting me to a community dinner the following weekend. Another text followed from Carter, checking in to see how I was doing. 6 weeks ago, my life had been defined by my relationship to others: daughter, sister, fiancé. My worth measured by how well I fulfilled those roles, how perfectly I met expectations that were never truly mine. Now, those definitions had been stripped away, painful as that process had been. In their place was something both terrifying and exhilarating: possibility. That afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Olivia at the architectural firm. The Westridge project is back on. The Bennetts withdrew their objections after some internal family discussions. Your position as lead architect remains unchanged. Take the time you need, but know your work is waiting when you're ready. I smiled at the screen, imagining the internal family discussions that must have occurred. Perhaps Vanessa had kept her word about telling the truth. Perhaps the Bennetts had realized the potential legal and reputation risks of their interference. It didn't really matter. What mattered was that one more piece of my professional life had been reclaimed from the chaos. As the sun began to set, casting long golden reflections across the lake, I walked the perimeter of the property, really seeing it through adult eyes. The towering pines that had seemed magical in childhood were still majestic. But now I noticed their steadfastness too, how they bent with strong winds rather than breaking, how their roots ran deep and interconnected beneath the surface. Near the edge of the property, I discovered something I'd forgotten: a small bench my grandfather had built decades ago, positioned to catch the last rays of sunset. It had weathered over the years, the wood silvered by exposure, but remained solid and welcoming. I sat, running my hand along the smooth armrest, feeling the connection to family history that couldn't be broken by recent betrayals. From this vantage point, I could see both backward and forward: the lake house that represented my past, the town that might be part of my future. Neither path was certain or perfect. Both contained complexity and challenge, but for the first time in my adult life, the choice was truly mine. As darkness fell, I made my way back to the house, turning on lights as I went. Not just for practical illumination, but as a symbol. This place was no longer shuttered and sleeping, preserved in memory. It was awake, alive, evolving, just like me. I stood on the porch for a long moment, looking at the warm glow spilling from windows that had been dark for too long. Then I stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind me, not to shut out the world, but to claim my space within it. In the quiet kitchen, I opened my grandmother's journal once more, and wrote what felt like both an ending and a beginning. At my wedding, my sister announced her pregnancy with my fiancé. She smiled like she'd won a prize, then whispered, "It's his." I didn't cry or scream. I smiled back, reached for my phone, and played the video that exposed everything. That moment didn't just break my heart, it freed it. Because sometimes what looks like betrayal is actually liberation. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted makes room for what you truly need. And sometimes the hardest moments of our lives aren't punishments, but doorways to becoming who we were always meant to be. Today, I choose to walk through that door with my head held high, grateful not for the pain, but for the clarity it brought. This is not the life I planned. It's better. It's mine. I closed the journal, set down my pen, and looked around at the home I was reclaiming, one day at a time. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. Like truth, I thought, sometimes painful in its revelation, but ultimately illuminating, guiding us home to ourselves. 6 months passed more quickly than I could have imagined. The seasons changed from summer to autumn, painting the lakeside in brilliant reds and golds before giving way to the first dusting of winter snow. The boathouse renovation project had evolved from sketches to reality. We'd preserved the weathered exterior while transforming the interior into a bright, welcoming space with floor-to-ceiling windows that embraced the lake view. The grand opening was scheduled for next weekend, and somehow I'd been persuaded to give a short speech. "It's your design that brought this place back to life," Margaret had insisted when I tried to decline. People want to hear from the woman who saw the potential when others saw only decay. I stood now in that completed space, making final notes before the contractors cleared out their tool. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting geometric patterns across the reclaimed wood floor. The building hummed with possibility. Soon it would host community classes, local art exhibitions, senior gatherings, children's programs, a space where people could connect and create together. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, just landed at the airport. Can't wait to see this project you've been raving about. Hotels booked for 2 nights. Plenty of time to convince you to come back to the city. I smiled at her persistence. After the Westridge project had been successfully completed remotely, Olivia had been dropping increasingly unsubtle hints about my return to the firm. She'd even suggested opening a satellite office near the lake, with me as the managing partner. It was tempting in many ways. I missed the creative challenges of large-scale projects, the collaborative energy of the design team. But something held me back from committing. The lake house had become more than a refuge. It was becoming a home, and the small town was slowly becoming a community where I belonged, not just a place I was visiting. "See you at dinner," I texted back. "The reservation's at 7. As I locked up the boathouse, my phone rang. Morgan's ringtone. "How's my favorite lake hermit?" She greeted me cheerfully. "Hardly a hermit anymore." I laughed. Between the boathouse project, the community planning committee, and Margaret's book club, I barely have time to myself these days. "That's what I like to hear," Morgan said. "Listen, Sam and I are coming up this weekend for the grand opening. We wouldn't miss it for the world. It's a long drive for a small town ribbon cutting." "It's not small to you," Morgan replied simply. "Therefore it's not small to us." After hanging up, I drove back to the lake house, now fully renovated and winterized. The transformation had been gradual: new insulation, updated heating system, repairs to the dock and boathouse. But I'd been careful to preserve its essential character, the bones my grandmother had loved. Her books still filled the built-in shelves. Her collection of hand-thrown pottery still lined the kitchen windowsill. But now my architectural drawings covered the dining table. My music played through speakers I'd installed. My favorite reading chair sat positioned to catch the morning light. As I prepared dinner, a simple pasta with vegetables from the last farmer's market of the season, I thought about how much had changed since that catastrophic wedding day. The annulment had been finalized 3 months ago, with surprisingly little drama once James realized the extent of evidence I had regarding his pattern of fraud. His father's company had quietly ended their partnership with my parents' business, a fact my mother still hadn't forgiven me for, though she'd stopped mentioning it in her increasingly infrequent calls. Vanessa had moved to Seattle, according to our last stilted phone conversation. She was working for a marketing firm and seeing a therapist regularly. "I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not being the favorite or the pretty one, or the venter of attention," she'd said, a hint of real self-awareness in her voice. Our relationship remained fragile, more honest than it had ever been, but burdened by the weight of past betrayals. Healing would take time, if it came at all. My parents maintained a polite distance, making occasional overtures that felt more like obligations than genuine connection. Last month, my father had called to awkwardly invite me to their anniversary dinner. "It would mean a lot to your mother," he'd said, not quite meeting my eyes when I agreed to attend. The evening had been a carefully choreographed performance of normalcy, everyone avoiding any mention of the wedding or its aftermath. I'd left early, driving back to the lake house with a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Some relationships couldn't be repaired, not because forgiveness was impossible, but because the foundation had never been solid to begin with. That was a painful truth I was still learning to accept. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. Olivia stood on the porch, her city polish looking slightly out of place against the rustic backdrop of the lake house. "This is," she asked, taking in the view of the lake as I welcomed her inside. "Eliza, it's breathtaking. Wait until you see it at sunrise," I replied, taking her coat. "The light on the water is incredible." Olivia wandered through the main room, studying the space with an architect's eye. "You've done amazing work here. It's respectful of the original structure but clearly has your stamp on it." "That was the goal," I said, pouring her a glass of wine. "Honor what came before while making room for what's now." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a metaphor for more than just architecture." I smiled. acknowledging the observation. Maybe it is. Over dinner, Olivia updated me on firm gossip and upcoming projects. Then, as we moved to the living room with fresh glasses of wine, she got to the real purpose of her visit. The Eastwood development is officially a go, she said, trying to sound casual. 300 acres mixed-use community with sustainability as the core principle. Exactly the kind of project you've always wanted to lead.
It sounds incredible,
I admitted, feeling a familiar pull toward the creative challenge. It could be your triumphant return to the firm, Olivia continued.
Everyone misses you, Eliza.
Your talent is being wasted on small-town renovations. I looked around at the home I'd rebuilt, both physically and emotionally.
Nothing that matters is ever wasted.
Olivia. She studied me for a long moment.
You're different.
Not just calmer or happier, though you're both those things. You're more present.
I'm more myself.
I corrected gently. For years I shaped myself to fit other people's expectations. My parents', Vanessa's, even James's. I was so focused on being what everyone needed that I forgot to ask what I needed.
And what do you need?
Olivia asked, her tone shifting from professional recruitment to genuine curiosity.
I considered the question carefully.
Purpose, community, work that matters, and the freedom to define those things for myself.
You can have all that in the city too.
She pointed out. I know, I acknowledged.
And maybe someday I'll want that again.
But right now, this is where I need to be. The next morning, I took Olivia to see the boathouse project before her flight back to the city. Standing in the completed space, watching her professional assessment turn to genuine admiration, I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with seeking approval. This is exceptional work, she said finally. Different from your commercial projects, but the attention to detail, the way you've honored the original structure while making it functional for new purposes. It's signature Eliza Harrington. Thank you, I said simply, accepting the compliment without deflection. Another small change in the new life I was building. After Olivia left, promising to revisit the conversation about my return in a few months, I drove to Margaret's house for our weekly lunch. These gatherings had become a touchstone in my new routine, part friendship, part mentorship, entirely genuine. So, Margaret asked as she served homemade soup at her kitchen table, "Did your big city boss convince you to abandon us?" I laughed at her directness. Not yet, though she made a compelling case. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. You know, when Rose first mentioned you might someday live in this house permanently, I was skeptical. You seemed so firmly planted in your city life, your prestigious career. Grandma said that, I asked, surprised. When? About a year before she passed. We were having tea right where you're sitting now, she said. Someday Eliza will realize she doesn't have to earn her place in the world by making herself smaller. When that happens, she'll need somewhere to stand in her full height. This house will be waiting. Tears pricked at my eyes. She never told me that. She didn't need to, Margaret replied gently. She trusted you'd find your way here when you were ready. After lunch, I walked along the lakeshore, Margaret's revelation settling into my heart like a missing puzzle piece. Grandma Rose hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me a foundation upon which to build a life of my own choosing. Not a retreat from the world, but a vantage point from which to engage with it, authentically. The weekend of the boathouse opening arrived with a flurry of activity. Morgan and Sam drove up Friday evening, bringing city energy and genuine excitement about this new chapter in my life. The guest room was prepared, the fridge stocked, the fireplace ready for long conversations that would stretch into the night. I still can't believe how much has changed in 6 months, Morgan said as we sat by the fire that evening, Sam having gone to bed early. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't discovered James and Vanessa's betrayal before the wedding? I considered the question seriously. I'd be living someone else's version of my life, I said finally. Still trying to earn love by accommodating, still making myself smaller to avoid conflict, still measuring my worth by how well I met others' expectations. You were never small, Morgan objected loyally. Not in capability. Maybe, but in self-belief, in willingness to claim my own space. I shook my head. I made myself fit the roles others assigned me, the reliable daughter, the supportive sister, the accommodating partner. I thought if I performed those roles perfectly enough, I'd eventually earn the right to be seen, really seen. Morgan reached over and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I always saw you, even when you couldn't see yourself. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Perfect weather for the boathouse opening. I dressed carefully in a deep teal dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Professional but approachable, confident, without being showy. As I fastened my grandmother's silver earrings, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused, really looking at the woman staring back at me. She looked different from the bride who had walked down the aisle 6 months ago. Not just the haircut, though the shoulder-length style suited me better than the long waves I'd maintained, because James preferred them. There was a clarity in my eyes that hadn't been there before, a steadiness in my posture that spoke of hard-won self-knowledge, rather than rigid self-control. "Ready for your big day?" Morgan asked, appearing in the doorway. I smiled at our reflection, my oldest friend standing beside me, both of us exactly where we were meant to be. More than ready. The boathouse ceremony exceeded all expectations. The entire town seemed to have turned out, plus visitors from neighboring communities who had heard about the renovation. Margaret had organized everything beautifully, local musicians playing softly in the corner, refreshments provided by the town's bakery and cafe, children darting excitedly through the space that would soon host their art classes and science clubs. Mayor Collins gave a brief introduction about the project's importance to the community, then turned to me with a warm smile. And now, a few words from the architect who made this transformation possible, our own Eliza Harrington. Our own, two simple words that wrapped around my heart like a blessing. I stepped forward, notes forgotten as I looked out at the gathered faces, neighbors who had become friends, Margaret beaming proudly from the front row, Morgan and Sam giving me thumbs up from beside the refreshment table, and in the back, two unexpected figures. My parents, standing somewhat awkwardly but undeniably present. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady and clear. When I first walked into this building 6 months ago, many people saw only what had been lost, a structure that had deteriorated, a purpose that had been forgotten. But what I saw was possibility, the strong foundation that remained, the bones that could support something new while honoring what came before. I paused, meeting the eyes of people who had welcomed me into their community. That's what this renovation represents, not erasing history, but building upon it, creating space for new stories while respecting the old ones. Finding beauty in both the weathered and the newly crafted. From the back of the room, my father shifted slightly, his expression unreadable. My mother dabbed at her eye with a tissue. My grandmother Rose Harrington loved this lake, this town, this community. I continued. She understood something. I'm only now beginning to learn that our truest homes are not just physical spaces, but places where we can stand in our full truth and still belong, where we can grow and change without apology, where we can build connections based on authenticity rather than expectation. The room had grown completely still, everyone listening with an intensity that might once have made me nervous. Now it felt like an affirmation, that my words mattered, that my voice deserved to be heard. This boathouse is now yours, a place for gathering, for creating, for celebrating this community's past and future. May it serve you well for many years to come. I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for the journey that had led me here. Thank you for letting me be part of it. The applause was immediate and heartfelt as people surged forward to explore the space, offer congratulations, and share their plans for programs and events. I made my way slowly toward the back of the room where my parents still stood. "That was a lovely speech," my mother said stiffly. "Very moving." "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuine despite the awkwardness between us. "It means a lot." My father cleared his throat. "The place looks good. Professional work. Coming from him, it was high praise. We thought it is. Your mother thought we should see what you've been working on up here," he continued, words coming with obvious difficulty. "Understand why you—" I studied them both. My polished, image-conscious mother, my pragmatic, business-minded father. They looked somehow smaller than they had 6 months ago, less intimidating. Or perhaps I was simply standing taller. "Would you like to see the lake house renovations?" I offered. "Maybe stay for dinner." A tentative truce, not a full reconciliation. A small opening rather than a wide embrace. It was all I could honestly offer right now, and they seemed to understand that. "We'd like that," my mother said quietly. Later that evening, after my parents had left with cautious promises to visit again soon, I stood on the dock watching moonlight shimmer across the lake's surface. Morgan joined me, wrapping a blanket around both our shoulders against the November chill. "So," she said, after a comfortable silence, "you've rebuilt a historic building, established yourself in a new community, navigated family drama, and found your voice. What's next for Eliza Harrington?" I laughed at her summary. "When you put it that way, maybe I should take a break." "Not a chance," Morgan replied, knowing me too well. "You've got that look. The one that means you're planning something." I smiled, acknowledging the truth in her observation. "I've been thinking about a new project. A series of affordable, sustainable homes along the North Shore. Environmentally integrated, community-oriented. Something that combines my commercial experience with what I've learned here." "Sounds perfect," Morgan said. "Big enough to challenge you, meaningful enough to matter." We stood in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the clear night sky. So different from the city lights I once thought I couldn't live without. "You know what I realized recently?" I said softly. "That day at my wedding when everything fell apart so publicly, so painfully. It wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning of a better one." Morgan nodded. "Phoenix rising from the ashes and all that." "Something like that," I agreed. "Though it's less about dramatic rebirth and more about quiet reclamation. Taking back pieces of myself I'd given away too freely. Building something new with what remains." "Like your boathouse renovation," Morgan observed. "Exactly like that." Honoring the foundation while creating something authentic and new. Later that night, after Morgan and Sam had gone to bed, I sat at my grandmother's desk, now my desk, and opened her journal to a fresh page, the same journal where I'd begun recording my journey 6 months ago, each entry marking not just the passage of time but the evolution of perspective. "Today we celebrated the boathouse opening," I wrote. "A building transformed, given new purpose while honoring its history. Like me, still standing on the same foundation but reimagined, renewed, reclaimed." 6 months ago I stood frozen at my own wedding reception, watching my carefully constructed life crumble around me. I thought I was witnessing an ending of my relationship, my family bonds, my carefully laid plans. Instead, I was experiencing a liberation I didn't know I needed. The path from there to here wasn't straight or simple. It involved grief, anger, confusion, loneliness, but also discovery, community, purpose, and a slowly growing faith in my own voice. I'm not the same woman who walked down that aisle 6 months ago. I'm stronger, certainly, but also softer in the ways that matter, more compassionate with myself, more honest about my needs, more willing to stand in my truth even when it's uncomfortable. Grandma Rose knew something I'm only now beginning to understand, that sometimes we need to lose the life we thought we wanted to find the life that's waiting for us. That betrayal, painful as it is, can be the doorway to authenticity if we're brave enough to walk through it. I don't know what the future holds. Reconciliation with my family may come slowly, if at all. My relationship with Vanessa may never fully heal. New challenges and losses will surely find me, as they find us all. But I know this. I will face whatever comes as myself, not as someone's daughter or sister or partner, not as a role or a performance, but as the woman I am still becoming, imperfect, evolving, authentic. And that I've finally learned is more than enough. I closed the journal, set down my pen, and walked to the window. The lake stretched before me, silver black under the moon, constant yet ever-changing, like memory, like healing, like growth, a process rather than a destination. 6 months ago, at my wedding, my sister had announced her pregnancy with my fiancé. She had smiled like she'd won a prize, then whispered, "It's his." I hadn't cried or screamed. I had smiled back, reached for my phone, and played the video that exposed everything. That moment had broken my heart, but freed my spirit. It had shown me that endings can be beginnings, that loss can lead to discovery, that sometimes the most painful moments of our lives are actually doorways to our most authentic self. I placed my palm against the cool window glass, a quiet promise to the woman I had been, and the woman I was becoming. The journey wasn't over, it was in many ways just beginning. But for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was walking the path on my own terms, guided by my own light rather than reflections of others' expectations. And that made all the difference. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.